You may have noticed my Mazda RX-7 sitting on jack stands in the background of recent videos. After I blew up and replaced the K-series that resides inside, I let it sit for 9 months. But why? Before I get into it, I feel like a recap is needed to see how we ended up here. But for the sake of not wanting to be too repetitive and for the YouTube retention algorithm, I'm going to try to give you this recap in under 60 seconds. If you want to see a more detailed recap covering this build in 20 minutes, check the link in the description below. I bought the car 5 years ago in 2020 from somebody who had already started the K-swap on this chassis, but taking over someone else's work almost made it more work for me than it would have been if I just start from scratch. There were a bunch of issues: leaking oil pan, intake manifold, warp header, and so on. We fixed the issues on the car and it made 365 wheel horsepower. 365 is a lot with such a light car weighing 2,600 pounds, so I wanted to make the car look the part as well. We put on feed-style fenders, a burnout front bumper, wrapped the car in Dragonfire red vinyl, and we put on tons of carbon fiber. With the car looking good now, we turned the boost up to 400 wheel horsepower and tuned it on pump gas so that I could show it off to everybody on my 48-state road trip. This showed us a few more issues that we needed to address in order to get the car better. At this point, I was confident in the reliability of the car and I was daily driving it around town for a few months. We swapped the interior over for a nice complete full black interior, swapped in a Ford Explorer rear diff to smooth it out and strengthen up the drivetrain, and put an electronic throttle body in to smooth it out the throttle pedal, and went on to continue enjoying the car. I then blew up the engine being dumb at a local charity event. Thankfully, K20s are cheap and we had swapped it out with another engine quickly and cheaply. But I haven't driven it since then. So why? Why haven't I been driving this car? Well, honestly, to pull the curtain back a little bit and break the fourth wall, it's because it seems like you guys don't like watching videos about this car, and I really can't afford to do anything to the car if I can't pay the bills with it. Being a YouTuber puts me in a weird situation sometimes. If you want to see more content with a certain car that we have, those views have to be higher on that car so we can justify making the content on them. Keep in mind, we're still an independently owned channel. There's no corporation telling us what to do, but there's also no corporate money. We have to pay for 2 videographers, Mark, our mechanic, our office building that we edit from, all our camera gear and business insurance, and so on and so forth. When I make a video about a budget build on an old Camaro and it gets 2 times more views than a video made 4 weeks later about my RX-7 that I spent 3 times more money on, it makes it really discouraging to do anything with the RX-7. So it just sits. And every now and then, I can make a video about the car and see if it gets more views this time around. But I think you guys aren't interested in it because it's not a 4-rotor all-wheel drive swapped, or it's not decked out in REM EMEA body kits. Normally that would mean that we just need to sell the car, and if I was smart like Ben, I would.
I'm selling the RX-7.
But the RX-7 is my dream car, and I'm not done with it. But know that your time as a viewer has influence here. We see the videos that you watch, like, and subscribe on, and we make more content on those cars as a result. So if you want to see more content on this RX-7, like, comment, and subscribe. But now, let's get back to the garage and see what the car looks like after it's been sitting for 9 months.
So first thing first, I don't actually know if it has a battery in it. In fact, pretty sure it doesn't have a battery in it, because I think I took the battery for the EK, because it uses the same size battery. So let me go ahead and check that first. Yeah, no battery. We're gonna cover it with this very high-tech piece of tape. Try this again, shall we? Will it start? Comment below if you think it will start. Oh yeah, was there ever any doubt? Honda reliability, baby. 9 months ain't nothing on this thing. All right, well, it runs. That's good. Putting the Honda engine in this car was definitely the best decision I've ever made.
If you're wondering why the RX-7 is on jack stands, it's because I took the wheels off to use for the RX-8 on track. They fit the car so well, so I decided to get some new wheels for the RX-7 instead.
I am super excited. We finally got wheels for the RX-7. We can take that thing off of the jack stands and put some nice, proper, big boy wheels on this car. I got these through Mazda Motorsports at like 50% of what they should cost. It's a crazy program that you might not have heard of. I hadn't heard of it before, but if you enter your Mazda into this program, you have to show them that you've used your Mazda on a racetrack or autocross or hill climb or you know, any motorsports environment, and they'll get you into part of the program. You can get any Mazda parts at cost. So if you needed to buy a new 13B because your rotary blew up, You can get it from them at cost instead of going to your local dealership and paying thousands of dollars more. And also they have aftermarket stuff like these wheels. So I got these wheels at about half of what they normally cost MSRP, which is incredible and in the perfect spec. Let me show you. The concept is racing. Woo, buddy.
I really like these wheels, not just because they're Z40s. I've seen obviously the bronze one, but these silver ones are just gorgeous. They shine a whole lot better than those bronze did. You know, it kind of looks like I'm kneeling in front of this wheel, like I'm praising it or something. I am not worthy. Yeah. Now that's a good looking wheel and tire.
Very curious about the fitment. So this car is wide body in the front. I believe it's 25 millimeters wider or 15 millimeters wider. So I do have a spacer on the front, which I think is a 12 millimeter spacer. So might not be enough. It might still actually sit inward a little bit, but let's see. Hard to tell without being on the ground. That's shocking. It's meant to just fit and you don't have to worry about it, and it definitely does fit. It's crazy just how much wheel you can fit on these cars. If they made them in the right offsets, you could get a 12-inch wheel, no problem on this. But it'd have to be like a plus 70 or something crazy. The silver on red it's a good look though. Well, personally, I think these wheels look amazing. I think that is the perfect look for this car. I know it doesn't look that different than the wheels that I had on it before, but I like it. It's my style, it's my taste. However, what's not my taste is this massive puddle of oil that's still underneath this car.
Even with the previous engine I had in the car, it seemed to drip just a little bit of oil. And over time, that oil drip turns into a very large puddle like this. Just another reason that I wasn't too keen on driving this car every day.
That will unfortunately be a little bit more difficult to fix than just putting wheels on the car. So we're gonna move this over to the lift and get started. Unfortunately, fixing this oil leak is not super simple. I do believe that it's the turbo drain line going into the oil pan. And because this is a custom engine swap, the subframe kind of wraps around the engine in a funky way. It's gonna be really difficult to actually remove the oil pan, which is why anytime I'm working on a car, and especially when it's difficult, I have brought our mechanic here, Mark. Mark, do you think you can figure this out?
Oh yeah, I think it'll be pretty easy.
Sounds good. All right, I'm gonna leave you to it.
Everyone and their mother wants to slap a turbo on whatever car they have. While most new cars today come from the factory with a turbo, some of the older tuner cars don't. So we pick up the wrench and do it ourselves, opting for cheap kits or properly built and fabricated setups. But what are some of the issues that can arise when you go this route? Extra intake air pressure means that you'll be shoving more air into the engine. That extra air will naturally find its way into the crankcase, and it'll need a bigger PCV ventilation system for that extra air. An issue that Ben has had with many of his DSMs, even though those cars are factory turbo. When he added extra boost to them, it needed extra ventilation. More power means more stress on the internals, and usually turbo cars are built to handle that extra stress with forged pistons or rods or a stronger block casting. Boosted air gets hot from the compression in the turbo, so that air needs to be cooled down before it gets to the engine, and we do that using an intercooler. Unfortunately, that means extra work on routing intake charge piping through the car, especially if it's not a factory turbo car. Finding where that piping fits can be quite a challenge. The air is not the only thing getting hot. A turbo in your engine bay is a gigantic heater warming everything up, including the oil and coolant. This means that you'll need to run an extra oil cooler and a bigger radiator, especially if your radiator is being blocked by an intercooler. Lastly, the oil that you're feeding your turbo with needs somewhere to go after it's made its way through the turbo. That oil needs to get returned to its home down in the oil pan, which means routing oil return lines right by that very hot exhaust manifold. Cars with turbos from the factory have many of these issues refined or solved completely because they've spent years developing each car, sometimes decades, with multi-millions of engineering dollars invested. It helps to have a full R&D team, and we just have Mark. And oftentimes, these aftermarket turbo components can get really expensive. We're always looking for the most affordable way to make more reliable power. This can unfortunately lead to using cheaper turbo components that can cause even more issues. Issues like poor intercooler pipe fitment, rubbing holes in the pipes, exhaust piping cracks, boost leaks, turbos that are just not as efficient at making power, or turbos that leak, and oil lines that leak because of cheap fittings.
But this is not a cheap turbo kit. This oil pan is a Unit 2 fabrication oil pan. It's very nice. It's got all the baffled trap doors and everything in it. The problem is, we modified it for the turbo return drain. We welded this bung onto the side here, and well, we didn't do that great of a job. Tried to put it up as high as I could near the flange, and it made it really hard to get the welding thing in there, and then it started leaking. We put RTV over it, and probably also warped when we welded it. So the problem is that, but we do have a solution. The solution is the exact same pan, but we have two minor differences, one of which being this has a bung welded on by Unit 2 fabrication, so proper welding professionals. And this thing is not gonna leak. The welds on it look way better, and well, it's been proven not to leak. So that's good, except we're not even using this bung because of the change that we're making here, which is a K-Power timing cover that has an AN fitting on it. So one thing that I have to do is a small modification to this oil pan that we did to the old oil pan, and that is I have to notch the front flange here because it is that close to the steering rack on this car. So I have to grind off the front part of this oil pan just a little bit in order to clearance the steering rack on this car. What's really crazy is we barely ran this engine before. Ran it up the road to Starbucks and back before doing this, and look at all of this. You see all of this? Isn't that crazy? I don't think I've seen that happen before, especially with barely putting miles on it. I think this is the first time I've actually looked inside an engine that I've put Restore and Protect in, the Valvoline Restore and Protect, and I think this is the effects of Restore and Protect. It's actually grabbing all that dirt and cleaning the engine. Like, that's absolutely crazy. So I mean, here's what it looks like. It's silver underneath, right? But all of that, I think is getting collected by the oil and running down. You can see it on the oil pickup as well. You see this like stuff kind of running down. Actually right there, a little bit of tarnishing. I think that's from it coming down from the engine. This engine was very dirty before. I do think that is Valvoline's Restore and Protect putting in the work. So we have the oil return for the turbo right here. This line would have normally gone to the oil pan, which is what we had before, oil returning directly to the oil pan, but it's too low. As we've already discussed, it's too low, it can cause the turbo to smoke. It's just not as effective of a drain return, and then also it can leak, which obviously we saw. My Escort actually has a much better way to route the oil back from the turbo because I had spent a lot of years on developing this aftermarket turbo. Obviously, Escorts didn't come with turbos from the factory. If you look up here and look past the cobwebs, you'll notice my turbo drain line is coming all the way up a bit higher into, this is called a windage tray, and then the oil pan down here doesn't actually have any bungs into it. I originally welded bungs into that oil pan, but then my turbo started smoking because it was running into, I guess, sitting oil. Also, this flange here is really thin, and so it kind of warped the oil pan by welding onto it. So putting it up there on the windage tray was actually much better. Also closer resembling a factory installed turbo setup, which would be returning the oil much higher up on the block. So we don't want to run back to the oil pan down here, but there's nowhere really up here to put a return because this is kind of the girdle placement of the main bearings, so we can't really put anything in here into the block. So we have another solution. Further up on this engine, on the timing cover, there's like an access plate for the timing chain, and that's way up here, and we can actually replace that timing cover with one of these to run the return into this. So this plate will go all the way up here, which means we're returning the oil now way up here, which is probably one of the highest points in the low pressure oil zone of the engine. Unfortunately, that does mean we have to cut the return line shorter. And unfortunately, what that means is to access that return line, we have to take the turbo off. So I'm gonna let Mark do that.
Before I do all that, like, we really need to put the subframe back in. Like, I think we're kind of jumping to all these other things that we need to take care of. And we need to focus on one thing at a time.
All right, fine.
Wow, I'm surprised you picked that up. And you're putting it on backwards.
Backwards, goes this way.
Perfect.
There we go.
No, put it on backwards.
No, this way.
You know, I should have tried this to begin with. I think I'm gonna go ahead and get the plate ready next.
All right, let's see if it starts.
I don't know why it wouldn't.
Because you broke it, probably.
No, you touched it too, you know.
I did touch it. Well, those things aren't gonna break.
How's your oil pressure?
77 PSI.
Nice. Okay, well then you're good.
Good. Cool.
Your blue bung is not leaking.
Okay, well, we have now solved 2 issues on this car. It has wheels, and it now no longer leaks oil. So now on to the 3rd issue, cleaning it.
Being into cars as a profession for over a decade now has made me a bit bitter. Cars have become a means to an end. I have to do this and that to this car or that one in order to make the content that I need to make. But this has turned a once passionate hobby into a boring, never-ending to-do list. And sometimes that's needed, but with this RX7, I kind of just don't care. I don't care about what needs to be done to it. I don't care that I'm not driving it as much as I should be, and I don't care that people will make fun of me if something breaks because I should have kept it rotary. This car is for me, not for YouTube. With this car, I throw away the to-do list. I don't care if I make a video that's profitable, brings in AdSense revenue, or gets sponsors on board. I enjoy this car for what it is. No matter how many times I drive it, or how many times it breaks, or if it leaks oil, or if it needs a proper paint job, I know that with time, it'll happen. And right now, in the moment, that doesn't matter. Everyone needs a hobby. And even though my favorite hobby has become my job, cars are still my outlet. And I want to make sure that I don't resent it. So I need this car for me. RX7s for some reason get people so angry. Angry that it's not rotary, or if it is, they're angry that it's not LS swapped. This RX7, more than any of my other cars, generates the most controversial comments. It's the reason that we don't mention politics or religion on this channel, because that's not what this channel is about. We're a car channel. We're not trying to stir up controversy for views. That's not what we do. People can get so emotionally blinded by their opinions that it generates hatred towards other people. It makes it hard for me to want to make videos about this car when I know everyone has such strong opinions about it. Don't get me wrong, I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to own this car, but I bought this car back only a few years after we had become YouTubers, back when we had not even 1/10 of the subscribers that we have today. I didn't buy this car because of YouTube. I bought this car because I wanted it. It's my hobby car. It's my outlet. It keeps me going. I'm not sure when the next time will be that I make a video with this car, especially considering all the other projects that I have going on. But for now, this car will be tinkered with off camera here and there on my own time, because there's some stuff that needs to be fixed that I don't think you guys would be too interested in watching.
So taking a look at my door panel here, I am missing my window switch, which belongs there. Now I have a window switch, but you see it broke. So this is an aftermarket window switch that plugs into this guy here, and it stopped working. So naturally I got another window switch, and this one is OEM, but see, it also broke. That seems to be a common problem on these RX7s, so I'm gonna have to get another window switch. And you come over to the passenger side door here, you'll see it's a completely different design structure. And this one looks great, and the window switch actually works. But see, when you grab this handle to go and close the door, well, you see, it doesn't exactly work. It broke.